The lecture hall buzzed with nervous chatter as students from across the galaxy settled into their seats. Instructor Naovek adjusted his forearms, checking the security protocols one final time before beginning today's lesson. The Galactic Military Academy had strict rules about live demonstrations, but sometimes theory wasn't enough to prepare young cadets for the horrors they might face on frontier worlds. In the center of the room sat a reinforced containment unit, its energy field humming softly. Through the shimmering barrier, something large and dark moved restlessly back and forth. The creature inside was roughly the size of an earth tiger, but built like a nightmare. Its body was covered in smooth black plates that seemed to absorb light, making it difficult to focus on. 6 powerful legs ended in claws that could tear through starship hull plating, and its elongated head housed rows of crystalline teeth that gleamed like broken glass. The Draknari students, reptilian beings from the desert worlds, kept their distance from the containment unit. Their natural instincts screamed danger whenever they looked at the creature. The Luminari, ethereal beings of pure energy, dimmed their natural glow to avoid attracting attention. Even the insectoid Zephyrians, usually confident in their own predatory abilities, clicked their mandibles nervously. Only one student seemed unaffected by the display of concentrated lethality. Cadet Minho leaned forward in his seat, studying the creature with the same expression he might use to watch clouds drift across the sky. His dark eyes tracked the beast's movements, noting how it tested different sections of its prison with careful, intelligent probes. While his classmates hurriedly scribbled notes about emergency evacuation procedures, the human simply watched and learned. "This," Instructor Naovek announced, his voice carrying easily through the lecture hall's acoustics, "is a void stalker from the Deathworld Kethmore. In the past rotation alone, these creatures have been responsible for the complete elimination of 3 separate survey teams." A collective shudder ran through the non-human students. The Void Stalkers were legendary among spacefaring species, spoken of in hushed tones around military campfires. They were perfect killing machines, evolved on a world where only the most efficient predators survived. "The Stalker's hunting pattern is particularly insidious," the instructor continued, activating a holographic display that showed tactical diagrams. Rather than attacking immediately, it tracks its prey for days or even weeks. It allows its victims to see glimpses of itself, building psychological pressure until fear makes them careless. Only then does it strike. Minho raised his hand, and Naovek nodded for him to speak. "Has anyone tried non-aggressive contact protocols?" the human asked, his voice calm and curious. Several students turned to stare at him in disbelief. The Draknari cadet sitting next to him actually shifted his chair away, as if insanity might be contagious. Instructor Naovek's expression remained patient but firm. "Cadet Minho, the Void Stalker is not a creature that responds to diplomatic overtures. It is an apex predator with a neural structure optimized for hunting and killing. There are no known countermeasures except distance and superior firepower. But has anyone actually tried?" Minho persisted. Systematically tried to communicate with one?" The instructor paused, considering the question seriously despite its apparent absurdity. The survivors of previous encounters report that the creatures demonstrate high intelligence and complex behavioral patterns. However, every attempt at close contact has resulted in immediate fatality. Minho nodded thoughtfully, returning his attention to the contained stalker. The creature had stopped its restless pacing and now crouched near the front of its cage, almost as if it were listening to the conversation. Its primary eyes, large and multifaceted like a spider's but somehow more intelligent, seemed to focus directly on the human student. "The key to surviving a stalker encounter," Naovek continued, "lies in early detection and immediate evacuation. Their sensor organs can detect electromagnetic signatures from considerable distances, so standard military equipment actually makes you more vulnerable, not less." He activated another hologram, showing proper evacuation techniques. "If you encounter signs of stalker activity, you have approximately 18 standard hours to reach minimum safe distance. After that point, the creature will have your scent locked and evacuation becomes statistically unlikely to succeed." The lesson continued with detailed analysis of stalker anatomy, hunting patterns, and the few successful escapes on record. Through it all, Minho kept stealing glances at the contained creature, noting details that didn't match the instructor's descriptions. The way it positioned itself suggested curiosity rather than predatory planning. Its posture reminded him of something, though he couldn't quite identify what. As the class period neared its end, NAO Vec began explaining the security protocols that kept the stalkers safely contained. Multiple redundant energy fields, emergency sedation systems, and automated lockdown procedures all worked together to ensure that the creature could never escape its prison. The containment system has been tested extensively, he assured the nervous students. There is absolutely no possibility of. A sharp electrical crack interrupted his words as warning lights began flashing throughout the lecture hall. The primary containment field flickered once, twice, then died completely with a sound like breaking glass. The Void Stalker was free. The moment the containment field collapsed, chaos erupted in the lecture hall. Emergency alarms shrieked through the academy corridors, their piercing wails designed to alert security forces across the entire complex. Red warning lights bathed everything in an ominous glow as automated systems kicked into high gear. The Void Stalker emerged from its prison like liquid shadow given form. Its 6 powerful legs carried it in a flowing motion that seemed to defy physics, each step perfectly silent despite the creature's massive size. The beast's elongated head swiveled slowly, taking in its new environment with predatory calculation. Its crystalline teeth caught the emergency lighting and threw it back in dangerous rainbows. Panic spread through the student body like wildfire. The Draknari cadets were the first to move, their reptilian instincts screaming at them to flee. They scrambled over desks and chairs in their desperate rush toward the exits. The Luminari students simply vanished, their energy forms dissipating to reform near the emergency doors. Even the usually brave Zephyrians abandoned all pretense of dignity, their insectoid legs carrying them away from the freed predator as fast as possible. Instructor NAO Vec felt his combat training take control of his body. His 4 arms moved with practiced efficiency, 2 reaching for the emergency communicator on his belt, while the other 2 grabbed for the plasma rifle mounted on the classroom wall. The weapon felt reassuringly solid in his grip, though he knew that standard military firepower had limited effectiveness against Void Stalker armor plating. Code Black, Lecture Hall 7. He spoke rapidly into his communicator. Containment breach, repeat, containment breach. Need immediate backup with heavy weapons. The stalker's multifaceted eyes tracked the fleeing students with obvious interest. Its head tilted slightly, like a cat watching birds, and NAO Vec could see the creature's hunting instincts beginning to engage. In seconds, it would select a target, and the killing would begin. But one student wasn't running. Cadet Minho stood slowly from his seat, his movements careful and deliberate. The sudden motion caught the stalker's attention immediately, and those terrible eyes locked onto the human with laser focus. The creature's posture shifted subtly, muscles coiling beneath its dark armor as it prepared to strike. "Cadet Minho, get out of there!" NAO Vec shouted, raising his plasma rifle. But he couldn't get a clear shot with the human standing directly between him and the predator. Minho ignored the order completely. Instead, he took a small step toward the stalker, his hands visible and empty at his sides. The creature's mandibles spread wide, revealing those rows of crystalline death that had ended so many lives across the galaxy. "Easy there, big guy," Minho said softly, his voice carrying none of the fear that should have been choking his throat. "Nobody wants to hurt you." The words were spoken in the same gentle tone he had once used with the stray dogs that roamed the ruins of Old Sol. Back on Earth, before the colony ships, Minho's neighborhood had been full of abandoned animals made dangerous by hunger and fear. His grandmother had taught him that scared creatures were often more dangerous than truly aggressive ones, but they could also be reasoned with if you knew how to speak their language. The stalker paused in its attack posture, confusion flickering across its alien features. In its evolutionary memory, prey animals behaved in predictable ways. They ran, screaming and panicking, triggering the chase response that made hunting so satisfying. Or they fought back with desperate fury, providing the kind of violent struggle that sharpened the predator's skills. This strange bipedal creature was doing neither. Minho extended his right hand slowly, palm facing downward toward the floor, in what he hoped would be recognized as a submissive gesture. On Earth, showing the back of your hand to a strange dog indicated that you weren't carrying weapons or food, that you posed no immediate threat. "That's it," he murmured, taking another careful step forward. "You're just confused, aren't you? This isn't your territory. You don't know where you are." Behind him, Instructor N.A.L. Vec watched in frozen disbelief. Every instinct screamed at him to fire immediately, to cut down the human cadet before the stalker could kill him. But something held his finger back from the trigger. The creature's body language was all wrong for an imminent attack. Its sensor stalks were fully extended, focused entirely on the approaching human, with what looked almost like curiosity. The remaining students who hadn't yet reached the exits found themselves trapped between terror and fascination. They pressed against the walls, afraid to move but unable to look away from the impossible scene unfolding before them. Min-Ho made soft clicking sounds with his tongue, a noise that always calmed nervous animals back home. The stalker's head tilted further, and for a moment its mandibles closed slightly, reducing the display of weaponized teeth. "See," Min-Ho continued in that same soothing voice. "I'm not going to hurt you, and you don't really want to hurt me either, do you?" The creature took a tentative step forward, bringing them within arm's reach of each other. N.A.L. Vec tightened his grip on the plasma rifle, knowing that it perhaps seconds to act if the situation went wrong. But the stalker didn't attack. Instead, it lowered its massive head slightly, bringing those multifaceted eyes level with Min-Ho's face. The human smiled and reached out to touch nightmare-made flesh. The lecture hall fell into complete silence, except for the soft hum of life support systems. Even the emergency alarms seemed to quiet themselves, as if the Academy's computers couldn't process what their sensors were recording. Instructor N.A.L. Vec held his plasma rifle with trembling hands, his finger hovering over the trigger, but he found himself unable to fire. Min-Ho's fingertips made contact with the Void Stalker's armored hide, just behind its primary sensor cluster. The touch was gentle, barely more than a whisper contact, but the effect was immediate and stunning. The creature that had terrorized entire star systems began to emit a low, harmonic sound that seemed to vibrate through the floor and into everyone's bones. The sound was unlike anything in the xenobiological databases. It wasn't quite a purr like an earth cat might make, but it carried the same sense of contentment and relaxation. The deep thrumming noise seemed to come from somewhere deep inside the stalker's chest cavity, resonating through its entire body structure. "Impossible," breathed Cadet So-Young, one of the few students who hadn't fled the room. The young woman pressed herself against the far wall, her eyes wide with disbelief. "The files say they don't have vocal cords for non-aggressive sounds." Min-Ho began moving his fingers in slow, gentle circles on the creature's carapace. He had found a spot where the armored plates met in a natural groove, and his touch seemed to trigger some kind of pleasure response. The stalker's massive body began to relax, its 6 legs folding beneath it as it settled onto the classroom floor like an enormous, deadly cat. "That's it," Min-Ho whispered, his voice barely audible but somehow carrying to every corner of the silent room. "You're not a monster, are you? You're just lost and scared." The stalker's sensor stalk swiveled to track the human's movements, but there was no aggression in the gesture. Instead, the creature seemed to be studying Min-Ho with the same curiosity that a house pet might show toward a new toy. Its mandibles remained slightly open, but the threatening display of crystalline teeth had transformed into something that almost resembled a smile. Instructor N.A.L. Vec slowly lowered his weapon, though he didn't set aside completely. His military training wore with the evidence of his own eyes as he watched the galaxy's most feared predator behave like a contented domestic animal. The tactical manuals had never prepared him for this possibility. "How?" he asked, his voice hoarse with shock. "How is this possible?" Min-Ho glanced back without breaking contact with the stalker. "Same way you make friends with any scared animal, sir. You show them they don't need to be afraid of you." The human continued his gentle ministrations, exploring different areas of the creature's armor to find the spots that produced the strongest positive responses. When he scratched behind one of the smaller sensor organs, the stalker's harmonic purring grew louder, and it actually leaned into the touch, nearly knocking Min-Ho off balance with its weight. "On my home world," Min-Ho explained as he worked, "my grandmother ran an animal rescue center in the old city ruins. We took in creatures that other people said were too dangerous to save. Wolves that had been shot by farmers, bears driven mad by starvation, even poisonous snakes that had been captured and tortured by cruel children. His hands found another sensitive spot, and the stalker's eyes actually closed in what looked like bliss. The creature's breathing had slowed to match Minho's own calm rhythm. Grandmother always said that there's no such thing as a truly evil animal, the human continued. Just animals that are hurt, scared, or protecting something they love. She taught me that if you approach them with patience and respect, most creatures will choose peace over violence. Cadet Hyunwoo, who had been frozen near the door since a containment failure, found his voice. But the reports, entire colonies wiped out, thousands dead. Minho nodded seriously, never pausing in his gentle contact with the stalker. Probably true, but think about it from their perspective. Strange creatures with loud machines invade their territory, set up permanent structures, change the environment. What would any territorial predator do? The stalker shifted position slightly, rolling partially onto its side to give Minho better access to its underside. The gesture was so completely trusting, so utterly defenseless, that several students gasped audibly. The creature was exposing its most vulnerable areas to a potential threat, something that every tactical manual said was impossible for a void stalker. They're not mindless killing machines, Minho continued, running his hands along the softer armor plates of the creature's belly. They're intelligent, social creatures with complex emotional needs. Look at how it's responding to simple physical affection. When was the last time anyone tried just being nice to one? Instructor Naovek found himself stepping closer, his scientific curiosity overcoming his survival instincts. The behavioral analysis teams never reported anything like this. Because they approach with weapons and fear, Minho replied, "Animals can smell emotions. This one knew I wasn't afraid, so it didn't need to be afraid either." The stalker's purring grew even louder, and it began making small, almost playful movements with its claws, batting gently at Minho's sleeve like a kitten playing with string. The sight was so absurd, so completely contrary to everything they thought they knew about these creatures, that several people began laughing despite themselves. The nightmare had become a pet. The void stalker had completely settled onto the classroom floor, its massive form curled around Minho like a living fortress of dark armor. The creature's harmonic purring filled the room with a sound that seemed to calm everyone's nerves, transforming the emergency situation into something almost peaceful. Students who had been pressed against the walls in terror began to edge closer, their scientific curiosity overcoming their fear. Minho continued his gentle scratching behind the stalker's sensor organs, and the creature responded by nudging his shoulder with its enormous head. The gesture was so similar to an affectionate house cat that several students actually smiled despite the surreal nature of the situation. "I think I understand what's happening here," Minho said, addressing his classmates while never breaking contact with the stalker. "This creature isn't acting like a predator right now, because I'm not acting like prey." Cadet So Young took a tentative step forward, her earlier terror replaced by fascination. "What do you mean?" "Every species in this room evolves specific responses to predators," Minho explained. "When you see something dangerous, your instincts tell you to run, hide, or fight. Those are prey behaviors, and they trigger hunting responses in predators." The stalker lifted its head to look at So Young, but there was no aggression in the movement. Instead, the creature seemed mildly curious about the approaching student, its sensor stalk swiveling to examine her more closely. "But humans are different," Minho continued. "We evolved on a world where we had to share space with apex predators. We couldn't always run or hide, so we learned to communicate. We developed the ability to show predators that we weren't threats or prey." Instructor Naovek set his plasma rifle aside completely, his scientific mind racing to process these new possibilities. "Are you suggesting that the previous encounters failed because our people approached these creatures with aggressive intentions?" "Not aggressive exactly," Minho replied, demonstrating how different touch pressures affected the stalker's responses. "But definitely fearful and defensive. This one can probably smell the difference between confidence and fear, between curiosity and hostility." He guided the creature's massive head toward his classmates, and the stalker studied them with obvious intelligence. When Cadet Hyunwoo raised his hand in what he hoped was a peaceful gesture, the creature tilted its head and made a soft clicking sound that seemed almost conversational. On Earth, we domesticated wolves into dogs, turned wild cats into house pets, and even learned to work alongside bears and big cats in some regions, Minho continued, not through dominance or force, but through mutual respect and understanding. The revelation hit Instructor N.A.O. Vec like a physical blow. The colonial reports, they all mention approaching stalker territories with heavy weapons and defensive formations, which probably looked like invasion forces to the creatures living there. Minho nodded. Imagine if aliens landed on Earth with massive guns and started building permanent structures in your backyard. How would you respond? Cadet So-young had worked up the courage to extend her hand toward the stalker, mimicking Minho's calm posture. The creature sniffed her fingers delicately, then allowed her to touch one of its smaller sensor organs. The harmonic purring grew slightly louder, as if the stalker was pleased to have another friend. This changes everything, Instructor Nelvek murmured, his mind already racing to the implications. If these creatures can be reasoned with, if they're social rather than purely predatory. The colonies that were destroyed, Hyunwoo said slowly, they probably never tried to communicate. They just saw monsters and started shooting. Minho nodded sadly, and the stalkers saw invaders who needed to be driven away or eliminated. Both sides were just protecting what they thought was theirs. The stalker had begun exploring the classroom with lazy curiosity, Minho's hand still resting on its neck. It sniffed at desks and equipment with the same careful attention that a dog might show in a new environment. When it encountered N.A.O. Vec's dropped plasma rifle, it examined the weapon briefly before dismissing it as uninteresting. Look at how it's behaving, So-young observed. It's not hunting or stalking. It's exploring, learning about us the same way we're learning about it. Because we're not acting like enemies anymore, Minho replied. We're acting like potential friends. The creature paused its exploration to return to Minho's side, settling down next to him with a contented sigh that sounded remarkably human-like. It rested its massive head on the human's lap, closing its multifaceted eyes in apparent trust and relaxation. My grandmother used to say that every animal speaks the same basic language, Minho said softly, stroking the stalker's armored hide. Fear, anger, curiosity, affection, playfulness. The sounds and gestures might be different, but the emotions are universal. Instructor N.A.O. Vec was already composing reports in his mind, imagining how this discovery might revolutionize first contact protocols throughout the galaxy. The military implications alone. Not just military. Minho interrupted gently. Think about it. How many conflicts could be avoided if we approached unknown species as potential friends instead of potential threats? The stalker opened one eye and made a soft chirping sound that seemed almost like agreement. In that moment, looking at the galaxy's most feared predator behaving like an oversized pet, everyone in the room understood that they were witnessing the beginning of something revolutionary. The age of automatic hostility was ending. The age of interspecies understanding was about to begin. 3 months after the incident that would later be called the Impossible Day, Lieutenant Minho stood in the highest tower of the Galactic Military Academy. Through the massive crystal windows, the sprawling city of Centauri Prime stretched toward distant horizons, its countless lights twinkling like earthbound stars. But his attention was focused on the stern figure seated behind the polished desk. Admiral Kekstani was a Zephyrian, her insectoid features giving nothing away as she reviewed the security footage for what must have been the 100th time. Her compound eyes reflected the holographic display, showing Minho's first contact with the Void Stalker, and her mandibles clicked softly in what might have been disapproval. Your actions violated every established safety protocol in the Federation manual, the Admiral stated, her translated voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. You endangered yourself, your fellow cadets, and Academy property worth more than most planets' annual budgets. Minho maintained his respectful posture, hands clasped behind his back in proper military fashion. Yes, Admiral, I understand the charges against me. And yet, the Admiral continued, pausing the footage at the moment when the stalker had begun its harmonic purring. Your methods achieve what our best tactical minds deem completely impossible. In 17 years of frontier conflicts, we have never successfully established peaceful contact with a Void Stalker. She activated another display, showing casualty reports from the outer colonies. The numbers were staggering. Entire settlements wiped out, survey teams that simply vanished without trace, military units destroyed by creatures they never fully understood. The question before us, Admiral Kekstani said, is whether your success was a dangerous fluke or a reproducible technique that could save thousands of lives. Minho thought carefully before answering. With respect, Admiral, I believe it's reproducible, but it requires changing how we think about first contact situations. The Admiral's antennae twitched with interest. Explain. Most Federation species evolved as prey animals or developed advanced technology to avoid predators. Minho began. When we encounter dangerous creatures, our instincts tell us to maintain distance, show strength, prepare for combat. But humans evolved differently. He gestured toward Earth's position on the star chart. We shared our world with apex predators for millions of years. We learned to read their body language, understand their social structures, communicate across species barriers. What looks like reckless endangerment to other species is actually sophisticated interspecies diplomacy to us. Over the following weeks, Minho found himself at the center of heated debates in the highest levels of Federation command. Some officials demanded his immediate court-martial for reckless endangerment. Others saw his success as the key to solving the frontier crisis that had claimed so many lives. The breakthrough came when Cadet So Young volunteered for first official test of what they were calling the Human Interface Protocol. A captured ice stalker from the frozen world of Nixmore had been killing research teams for months, and conventional weapons had proven ineffective against its crystalline armor. In a controlled environment with multiple safety measures, So Young approached the creature using techniques she had learned by observing Minho. The results were immediate and dramatic. Within hours, the supposedly mindless killing machine was following her around like a devoted pet, responding to vocal commands, and even performing simple tricks. Word of the success spread through Federation space like wildfire. Suddenly, human cadets were the most sought-after personnel for frontier assignments. The military academy began developing specialized training programs focused on interspecies communication and non-aggressive contact protocols. Lieutenant Minho found himself promoted to head the new Xenobiology Communication Division, working alongside teams of human specialists who shared his unique background. Cadet Hygiene, who had grown up on a farming colony surrounded by Earth-imported livestock, proved exceptional at working with herbivorous alien species. Former street kid Jun SEO had an intuitive understanding of pack dynamics that made him invaluable when dealing with social predators. The program's first major field test came on the mining world of Calo 7, where creatures resembling enormous spiders had been terrorizing the extraction operations. Previous military responses had only made the situation worse, with the creatures becoming increasingly aggressive as more troops arrived. Minho's team approached the situation completely differently. Instead of deploying weapons in defensive positions, they studied the creature's behavioral patterns and territorial markers. They discovered that the attacks were actually defensive responses to mining operations that were damaging the creature's breeding grounds. Within a week, they had established a communication system using light patterns and vibrations. The spider-like beings, it turned out, were highly intelligent and had been trying to warn the miners about unstable ground that could have caused catastrophic cave-ins. Once true communication was established, both species worked together to identify safe mining zones that didn't threaten the creature's habitat. The success on Calo 7 became the template for a new approach to frontier exploration. Instead of military conquest, the Federation began sending mixed teams of humans trained in interspecies communication alongside traditional survey crews. 2 years later, Lieutenant Commander Minho stood before a new class of cadets in the same lecture hall where everything had begun. A new creature waited in its containment field, this time a luminous being from the gas giant Artemis that previous contact teams had classified as impossibly hostile. Remember, he told his students, human and alien alike, every species has its own way of saying hello. Our job is to learn their language before we assume they're speaking ours. The containment field lowered, and Minho stepped forward to make a new friend.